searching reasons why. Like someone like blames like, oh, a bunch of kids are committing suicides because this show, like presented it to them in like a romanticized way. So so a lot of mediums still do that. So I don't know if like that would be like the concrete reason.
Well, let's. What most parents feel like, especially that's what I would say too, with like the way their children end up being as violent because of the media that they're exposed to. So they're kind of feared of the type of media or the type of exposure that their children per se get because they don't know if they can obtain certain actions as of said media.
Yeah, it's weird how, I don't know. I feel like it's weird because some parents are very quick to blame other things. It's like, oh, my child is violent because he played COD as a kid. It's not really. They don't look to themselves, or they don't look to how to make the problem better. They blame things that happened in the past. They don't say, oh, my child is violent, I need to go give them therapy. They say, my child is violent, I'm going to take away all their video games.
And like that's not so much.
And yeah, that's not the problem.
Yeah.
Well, another philosopher, that we got into that because we were talking about Thomas Metzinger and the whole idea of what a person is, and how much power you have over yourself in order to make yourself happy or to change the way the world looks to you, etc. But Joseph Margolis, that was one of the ones that we were. If you were here earlier, he was one of the ones interviewed in the videos. Those are continued on with this group. There's plenty of fun stuff out there to watch. Peter Sloterdijk, I did get a term paper on him just recently, and it was really good. Found out lots of interesting stuff about him. I've been reading him for a while. All of these people are familiar to me, obviously, because I made the list. Sam Harris, we were talking about. Jürgen Habermas is kind of the pragmatist in Germany. So he's a German philosopher. I think he's dead now, actually. He was really pretty old. Habermas. Let me see. Is he still alive?
Yeah.
He's still alive. Wow. That's pretty cool. Amazing. I love that. When people live a long time and you can think, wow, did their philosophy have something to do with that? I don't know.
Maybe you just hog it down to sheer will.
Yeah. I mean, some philosophers have lived such short lives. There's not enough philosophy for us to actually delve into with them. But he's essentially a pragmatist. He studied under Heidegger and ended up teaching in German universities. This was, following World War II, so there's all kinds of interesting history there. But his philosophy is basically pragmatism and theories of communicative rationality, etc. So that's, a focus on the nature of language and how to make language better, improve it, etc. So he's interesting. Charles Taylor, I mentioned, again, associated with the kind of the evolution of the self. Sources of the Self was one of his books, and what that means for us. So I highly recommend reading some of his stuff to get an idea of the impact of these kinds of dynamic changes in our culture and how they impact individuals. He's really good on that. Alistair McGrath is interesting to me because he is a biology professor and a theology professor, and I think he's even got a PhD in national studies or something, but where he came up was he got involved with Richard Dawkins, who was one of those four horsemen, four atheists, four horsemen of the whatever they call themselves, that wanted to embarrass all religious people. And Alistair McGrath is not only a biologist the way Richard Dawkins was, but also a minister, a theologian. And so he was able to explain to Richard Dawkins where he was being goofy, and so that was really interesting to watch them. He's got some books out, but there's a really good dialogue on a video between the two of them as he's explaining things to Richard Dawkins, and you can tell it's frustrating to Richard Dawkins, but not to him. Daniel Dennett, we've talked about. Martha Nussbaum, we've talked about her. Hilary Putnam, he was just in this video that we saw. Slavoj Žižek is absolutely fascinating. He's probably one of the most popular philosophers in Europe right now, and he's kind of a showman. When he arrives and what he does, as I tried to explain, that the continental Europeans took that Hegelian philosophy on to language, so the French existentialists, the postmodernists, Derrida, and just talking about all the different interpretations that words can have and so on. And so he uses that whole European shtick in order to make some really interesting, intriguing points, about different topics of the day, or analyses of movies and art. He talks about lots of those kinds of things, and he's really pretty interesting to listen to, although he talks very quickly with a pretty heavy accent, and he's got a tic, which kind of makes things annoying because he's constantly, brushing snot from his nose because he's just, he's got this issue. He's explained, though, it's not cocaine. He doesn't use cocaine. So it's not, that he's running, his nose is running because of cocaine. But it's because he's got something. Alain Badiou, I think I've talked a little bit about him as an elderly French philosopher who uses sets. Remember, Peter Sloterdijk uses bubbles or spheres or globes as his metaphor to talk about things, whereas Professor Quine talked about the need for predicate language because we don't have things anymore. What we have are, variables with sets of characteristics. And so how do you define being when your language is viewed that way? Peter Singer, I just got a term paper about Peter Singer, and Peter Singer is a professor of philosophy and ethics at Princeton University. Still, I believe he's been there for quite some time. 1990, I think, is when he went there. And he's pretty radical because he's for animal rights, especially the animals that we eat. He's a vegan. He doesn't think we should eat meat for lots of reasons. He's also against individuals making too much money. If they make money more than a certain amount, he feels you should give it to people that are in need, charities and things of that sort. So very interesting individual, Peter Singer. He was not allowed in Europe for a lecture series that he was supposed to give because he had argued that if you're going to have abortion, you might as well allow women to kill children up to about age 2. Because they might have a child, decide that this child isn't worth the effort, and decide to take it out. And what's the difference between that and abortion? When you look at what actually defines a person, A fetus has many of the characteristics of a live, walking around kind of person. And if the definition of a person includes the ability to be self-reflective, then that doesn't really happen until you're about 2 years old. So, but now the thing is, people took that argument that he made and thought, he's for killing children. Actually, if you figured out how his argument was working, he was trying to argue against abortion. Because what he was saying is, it's just as horrible that you would be killing a fetus as killing a 2-year-old. You know? So his argument really was just the opposite of the way so many people took it. But as a result of that argument, he wasn't allowed into Germany to give his lecture that he was supposed to do. David Chalmers, we've actually had David Chalmers here, and he's mostly involved in talking about the mind and how the mind works. And what I really like about his latest work is he's into virtual reality and trying to figure out, what's virtual about virtual reality. It's reality.
Do you ever make Simpsons jokes?
Pardon?
Do you ever make Simpsons jokes?
He might.
You're a funny dude.
So he's pretty cool.
Didn't you say something about zombies?
The thing about zombies and robots is if you're talking about your personhood and you're thinking that you're a free agent that's able to decide things as opposed to being a Turing type machine where these stimuli make you do this and that's how you work. Well, that essentially is a zombie. The zombie is just constantly doing whatever, and the argument is we're not zombies because we have that free agency and we can change our minds. We don't have to do what a scientist would say, oh, he's now going to do this. And you go, no, I'm not going to do that. Interesting? That's how they use in philosophical circles. I know in movies you got lots of zombies going, piling up and brains or whatever they're doing. But in philosophy they like talking about it because it's the new way of talking about free will.
Honestly, they're kind of zombies these ways are kind of developing into that. I mean, I don't know if you know that show The Last of Us, but their zombies actually work the same way. I mean, they're still infected with something, but like the fungal infection or whatever is still connected to one like procedural method. So they all like follow like a step-by-step process. So I guess that makes sense. But we're getting modern zombies.
Your machine is blinking. Is it supposed to?
Again?
Oh,
That
yeah.
one robot, she was programmed to help her emotionally support this one girl.
This little girl.
Yeah, but then it kind of took a moment of its own and kind of got a little violent in a way. So it's kind of like makes me kind of think in a way that if that's the definition of what a person is, does that mean that technology can evolve to the point where they will be classified as a person?
Sure, if they pass the Turing test. Well, the Turing test in general, they have to be able to one have free will, free agency, and have thoughts and feelings, like essential to themselves.
It's like it's unrealistic to think that robots are going to take over, because if the definition of like a sufficiently advanced AI is a human constructed intelligence that can think like a human, well, if it thinks like a human, then it might want to take over. One of them might want to take over, but the others may not want to take over because
Ethics
humans
and
are
morals.
individuals.
Yeah, besides, I mean, if they're going to develop like things like thoughts, feelings,
Be cool.
like logic, they have to develop stuff like ethics and morals too. So, I mean, they have to argue with the idea of like taking a human life to get to that goal anyways.
Yeah,
Like other humans do.
there's certain circumstances where people have morals of killing a person doesn't.
Yeah, but they don't have like mass genocidal ones like every so often. I mean, you get one every
Well,
couple of
some
centuries.
humans
Or
have
just,
that,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
You get one that gets like to a level of power where they can act on that, but it's not like common. So and even if it, I guess, like theoretically speaking, if there is someone out there right at this moment that exists that's capable of doing that, it'd still be difficult for them in this like day and age to get there. I'd have to imagine it'd be the same way like robots and stuff existed.
Yeah.
Not just like unless like they develop them like if your idea is that they kind of just gang up on us and like robots against humans and start like a whole civil war.
Make good movies.
It'd be
Robots versus humans.